My name is Nolan, 68 years old, and once a proud construction contractor. After building a successful business and raising my son Jackson alone when my wife died, I thought I had secured my golden years. I never imagined my only son would destroy everything I built. Now I sit in this nursing home, bank accounts empty, abandoned, and forgotten. But what they didn't know was that this old man still had one last project to build. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, hit like and subscribe to hear how I fought back when my own flesh and blood left me with nothing. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, where winter stretched for 6 months, and character was built through hard work and perseverance. My father was a carpenter who taught me that a man's word and the quality of his work were the measures of his worth. I followed in his footsteps, learning the trade from the ground up, calluses forming on my hands before I was 16. College wasn't the plan for most kids in my town, but I was determined to learn the business side of construction. That's where I met Sarah. She was studying literature, her mind full of stories and ideas that fascinated me. She had these bright blue eyes that seemed to see right through to your soul. We were different in so many ways, but together we made sense. We married right after graduation, and I started my small construction company while Sarah taught at the local high school. For years we tried to have a child without success, and we had almost given up when Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Jackson came into our world on a snowy December morning in 1982, and I swear he was the most perfect thing I had ever seen. Those early years were the happiest of my life. Our little family thrived. The business grew steadily, and I specialized in custom homes, putting my heart into every blueprint and beam. Sarah filled our home with books and music, and Jackson inherited her curiosity and my determination. Evenings were spent with Jackson between us on the couch, as Sarah read stories that transported us to different worlds. On weekends, I would take him to construction sites, his little hard hat bobbing as he followed me around, asking endless questions. But happiness can be fragile. When Jackson turned 12, Sarah started having headaches. At first, we thought it was just stress from teaching, but the diagnosis came like a wrecking ball: aggressive brain cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. My world collapsed, and suddenly I was a single father, with a grieving boy and a business to run. The years that followed tested every ounce of strength I had. I would wake up at 5 to prepare breakfast and lunch for Jackson, work all day supervising crews and meeting clients, then rush home to help with homework and make dinner. There were nights I fell asleep at the kitchen table, exhausted, only to wake up and do it all again. But I never complained. Jackson was all I had left of Sarah, and I would have done anything for him. I made sure to be there for his football games, parent-teacher conferences, and school events, even if it meant rescheduling important client meetings. The business suffered sometimes, but I told myself it was worth it. Jackson needed stability, needed to know he was my priority. Looking back, I see now that something changed in high school. Jackson became more distant, spending less time at home and more with friends whose parents had money. He started comparing our modest house to the mansions I built for clients. When he got his driver's license, he wasn't satisfied with the used Toyota I could afford. He wanted a brand new sports car like his friend Thomas had. I chalked it up to teenage rebellion. But there was something deeper happening. A sense of entitlement was taking root. Still, I made excuses for him. He had lost his mother, after all. If material things made him happy, wasn't that understandable? College only amplified these problems. Jackson chose an expensive private university across the country. I had saved for his education, but it wasn't enough for the lifestyle he wanted. The calls would come regularly. He needed money for fraternity dues, for spring break trips, for a new laptop. Each time, I dipped into my retirement savings, telling myself it was an investment in his future. When he graduated with a business degree, I was so proud I could burst. He had a good job offer at a financial services firm in the city, and I thought finally he would stand on his own feet. Instead, the requests continued. A security deposit for a luxury apartment, furniture, a work wardrobe. I kept writing checks, ignoring the nagging voice that whispered this wasn't right. Through all this, I was building my retirement nest egg. By my early 60s, I had managed to save approximately $850,000 through decades of hard work and careful planning. I owned my home outright. The business was profitable, and I looked forward to a comfortable, if not luxurious, retirement. I even dreamed of traveling, seeing the places Sarah and I had planned to visit together someday. Jackson would visit home a few times a year, always with stories of big deals and important clients. He drove expensive cars and wore tailored suits, giving the impression of success. When I asked about his own savings or investments, he would laugh and say, "That's what I have you for, Dad. You're the saver in the family." I laughed too, taking it as a compliment rather than the warning sign it was. My pride in him blinded me to what was happening. The occasional hints about investment opportunities he thought I should consider. The questions about my will and estate planning. The subtle suggestions that I was getting too old to manage my own finances. I was lonely, and his attention made me feel valued and needed. When he called or visited, it brightened my whole week. I never questioned his motives, because doing so would have meant facing a truth I wasn't ready to see. The son I raised might not be the man I thought he was. My 65th birthday marked the official start of my retirement. Jackson flew in for the party, arriving 3 hours late with expensive gifts, a designer watch, and a bottle of scotch that cost more than what most of my employees made in a week. He seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, but I was just happy he had made the effort to come. He brought his new girlfriend, Allison, a slender blonde with a marketing degree and a quiet demeanor. While Jackson worked the room, chatting with my old friends and business associates, I noticed Allison watching him with an expression I couldn't quite read. When we had a moment alone, she seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact and changing the subject whenever I mentioned Jackson's childhood or asked how they had met. That weekend, I had my first real health scare. The arthritis that had been bothering my hands for years had spread to my knees and back, making it difficult to do the physical work I loved. On top of that, I experienced chest pains that sent me to the emergency room. It turned out to be nothing serious, just stress and indigestion, but it frightened me enough to make me think about the future. Jackson used this opportunity to bring up something he had apparently been considering for a while. "Dad, that house is too much for you now," he said over breakfast the morning after the hospital visit. "All those stairs, the yard work, the maintenance. You should sell it while the market is good and move somewhere more manageable." I resisted the idea at first. This was the home where I had raised him, where Sarah and I had built our life together. Every corner held memories I wasn't ready to part with, but Jackson was persistent. "I'm worried about you living here alone," he would say. "What if you fell and couldn't reach the phone? What if something happened and nobody knew?" He called daily for weeks, each time with a new article about seniors injuring themselves at home, or a story about someone's parent who had benefited from downsizing. His concern seemed genuine, and eventually, I gave in. The process of selling my home was more painful than I had anticipated. 40 years of life condensed into boxes labeled keep, donate, or trash. Each item came with a decision, and each decision felt like saying goodbye to a piece of my past. Sarah's books, Jackson's childhood toys, the kitchen table where we had shared thousands of meals, the backyard where I had taught him to throw a baseball. Real estate agents walked through our home, pointing out outdated features that needed to be changed to appeal to buyers. Jackson helped with the process, but his idea of helping was hiring people to pack everything and making unilateral decisions about what should be kept or discarded. More than once, I rescued items from donation piles, things that held no monetary value but were priceless to me. Sarah's handwritten recipe book, the first hammer my father gave me, Jackson's handprints in clay from kindergarten. The house sold quickly, for more than asking price. The real estate market was hot, and the neighborhood had become desirable for young families. I should have felt good about the financial windfall, but watching new owners plan renovations to erase all traces of our life there left me hollow. Jackson had already found what he called the perfect place for me, a small condo in a new development across town. It was all on one level, with modern appliances and a small patio instead of a yard. It was half the size of my house, meaning I had to part with even more possessions. The place was sterile, without character or history, but Jackson insisted it was ideal for a man my age. "We'll put the proceeds from the house into your retirement fund," he assured me. "It's a smart financial move, Dad." But when the paperwork was finalized, I discovered the condo was not in my name but Jackson's. He explained this away, as estate planning to avoid probate issues later and minimize taxes. "It's still your home," he insisted. "This just makes things simpler in the long run." I had my doubts but pushed them aside. This was my son, after all. The boy I had raised alone, the young man I had sacrificed for. Why would I question his intentions? Not long after the move, Jackson suggested another change. Following a minor heart episode that required an overnight hospital stay, he brought up the idea of power of attorney. "It just makes sense, Dad," he explained, sliding the documents across my new kitchen counter. "If something happens, and you can't make decisions for yourself, someone needs to be able to handle your affairs. Who better than your only son?" The documents were filled with legal jargon I struggled to understand. When I suggested having my longtime friend and attorney Frank look them over, Jackson became irritated. "Don't you trust me?" he asked, his voice holding an edge I rarely heard. "Frank is nearly as old as you are. His legal knowledge is probably outdated. I had these drawn up by a top firm in the city." I signed the papers, pushing down the unease that had begun to settle in my stomach. That evening, I called Frank anyway, seeking reassurance that I had done the right thing. Frank had been my friend since we were young men starting our businesses. He had handled my legal affairs for decades and had known Jackson since birth. His concern was immediate and unmistakable. "Nolan, this is a very broad power of attorney," he said after I described the documents. "Did you read the fine print? Did you get an independent review before signing?" When I admitted I hadn't, his sigh carried through the phone line. "I'm not saying Jackson would take advantage, but these arrangements can be risky. You're giving him complete control over your financial and medical decisions if you become incapacitated. And sometimes, the definition of incapacitated can be manipulated." I defended Jackson, perhaps too strongly. "He's my son, Frank. He wants what's best for me." "I hope you're right," Frank replied. "But I've seen good people make bad decisions when money is involved. Just keep your eyes open, and call me if anything feels wrong." I dismissed Frank's warnings as overprotective, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Over the following months, that seed grew as Jackson's behavior changed subtly. He insisted on being present for my doctor appointments, speaking over me, and emphasizing any memory lapses or confusion I showed. He suggested consolidating my bank accounts for easier management, and offered to handle bill payments since online banking can be confusing for seniors. Small decisions were gradually taken out of my hands. The independence I had valued all my life was eroding. So slowly, I barely noticed it happening. By the time I realized how much control I had surrendered, Jackson had inserted himself into nearly every aspect of my financial life. Winter came with a vengeance that year. A particularly bad fall on ice outside my condo led to a cracked rib and renewed concerns about my heart. The pain medication made me groggy, and I developed a persistent cough that worried my doctor enough to hospitalize me for observation. What should have been a 3-day stay extended to a week when tests revealed irregularities in my heart rhythm. Jackson visited daily, always when the doctors were making rounds. He asked detailed questions about my condition, focusing particularly on my cognitive state and ability to care for myself. I was too weak to notice how he steered these conversations, emphasizing incidents of confusion caused by medication and normal forgetfulness that comes with age. On the day of my scheduled release, Jackson arrived with news. "Dad, the doctors and I have discussed your situation, and we think it's best if you spend some time in a rehabilitation facility before going home." This was the first I had heard of such a plan. "Rehabilitation? For what? I just need rest." "You had a serious fall. "And your heart isn't stable," he explained patiently, as if to a child. "The doctors think you need physical therapy and monitoring before living independently again. It's just temporary, until you're stronger." I looked to the doctor for confirmation, and he nodded, though I later realized he was deferring to what he thought was a plan I had already accepted. Jackson had papers ready for my signature, transfer documents to what he called a top-notch rehabilitation center, where I would receive the best care possible. The ambulance didn't take me to a rehabilitation center but to Lakeside Gardens, a nursing home on the outskirts of town. The building was clean but dated, with a distinctive institutional smell that no amount of air freshener could mask. Residents in wheelchairs lined the hallways, some staring vacantly, others watching with interest as I was wheeled to my room. "There must be some mistake," I told the admitting nurse. "I'm supposed to be at a rehabilitation facility, just for a few weeks." She checked her paperwork. "This is a skilled nursing facility with rehabilitation services, Mr. Harrison. You're down for long-term care, but your treatment plan will be evaluated regularly." Jackson smoothed over my confusion and concerns. "It's the same thing, Dad. They just call it different names. You'll get the therapy you need here, and they have medical staff around the clock. Much safer than being alone at the condo." My room was small and shared with Walter Kennedy, a Vietnam veteran 5 years my senior with a sharp tongue and sharper mind. The furniture was utilitarian, the walls institutional beige. A single window overlooked a parking lot. My belongings, hastily packed by Jackson, filled just 2 small suitcases. Just for a few weeks, Jackson promised as he prepared to leave. "Once you're stronger, we'll reevaluate. I'll visit often, and I'll take care of everything at the condo." Days turned into weeks. Physical therapy consisted of brief sessions twice a week, nothing that couldn't have been done on an outpatient basis. The food was bland, the schedule rigid, and most activities seemed designed for residents with significant cognitive impairments. I felt out of place and increasingly frustrated. Walter became an unexpected ally. A retired history teacher with no family of his own, he had been at Lakeside for 3 years. "They warehouse us here," he told me bluntly our first night as roommates. "Out of sight, out of mind. Hope your son is different from most who dump their parents here." I defended Jackson vigorously, explaining the temporary nature of my stay. Walter just raised his eyebrows skeptically. Patricia, a night nurse in her 50s with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense, was the other bright spot in this dismal place. She treated residents with dignity, remembering preferences and personal details that made us feel human rather than just tasks to complete. Jackson's promised frequent visits dwindled rapidly. The first week, he came 3 times. The second week, just once. By the third week, he was making excuses about work pressure and travel. When he did visit, he seemed distracted and eager to leave, checking his watch and taking phone calls in the hallway. I began calling him, only to reach voicemail more often than not. Messages went unreturned for days. Increasingly worried, I asked to go back to the condo, even briefly, to check on things and collect more of my personal items. Jackson always had reasons why now wasn't a good time. 6 weeks into my stay, Patricia brought in mail that had been forwarded to me at Lakeside. Among junk flyers and a few bills was a bank statement I had been waiting for. My retirement accounts were held at First National, and I had always received monthly paper statements, a habit from before online banking. This would show exactly how much was in my accounts and ease the nagging worry that had been growing. The statement showed a balance so low it had to be a mistake. Where there should have been hundreds of thousands of dollars, the main account held just $3,000. I checked the transactions page with growing horror. Multiple large withdrawals had been made over the past 2 months, many on days when I was hospitalized or newly admitted to Lakeside. Patricia found me staring at the statement, my hands shaking. "Mr. Harrison? Nolan? Are you all right?" I couldn't speak, just handed her the paper. She scanned it quickly, her expression darkening. "These withdrawals, did you authorize them?" "No," I whispered. "I haven't touched that account since I moved to the condo." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Do you want me to help you check your other accounts? With Patricia's help, I used the facility's computer to access my online banking. The picture was even worse than the statement suggested. Every account had been systematically drained, with just minimum balances left to keep them open. My life savings, approximately $850,000, had vanished. Jackson had powers of attorney. Jackson had access to all my accounts. Jackson, who had been so insistent on managing my finances for my own good. I sat in stunned silence as the reality washed over me. My son had stolen everything. Patricia put a steady hand on my shoulder. I'll stay late tonight if you want to talk. And maybe we should contact the police? But I couldn't bring myself to report my own son. Not yet. I needed to hear his explanation first. Needed to believe there was some misunderstanding. Jackson didn't answer my calls for 3 days. When he finally visited, he arrived just before the end of visiting hours, ensuring our conversation would be brief. He looked different somehow, dressed even more expensively than usual, sporting a new haircut and designer watch. "Where is my money, Jackson?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. His face registered surprise, then quickly composed itself. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "My retirement accounts. They're empty. $850,000 gone." He sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. "Not gone, Dad. Invested. We talked about this. You agreed to let me diversify your portfolio into some higher yield opportunities. We never discussed this. You never had my permission to take everything. Your memory isn't what it used to be," he said, his voice patronizing. "We had several conversations about these investments. They're just temporarily illiquid. The returns will be worth it. I want my money back. Now." My voice shook with anger and hurt. His expression hardened. "That's not possible. The investments are locked in for at least 18 months. "What investments exactly? Show me the paperwork." "I don't have it with me." "Look, I'm handling this for you because you can't anymore. You never saved enough for retirement anyway. If you had been a better provider, a better father, I wouldn't have to clean up your financial mess." The accusation hit like a physical blow. A better father? I gave you everything. I worked myself to exhaustion raising you alone. "You were never there," he shouted, suddenly angry. "Always working, always too busy. Mom died, and you just buried yourself in that business, leaving me to raise myself." This rewriting of our history stunned me into momentary silence. Jackson used the opportunity to stand and gather his coat. "I have to go. I have an early flight tomorrow. I'll be traveling for work, but I'll visit when I get back." He paused at the door. "Trust me, Dad. I'm taking care of everything." He never came back. Calls went straight to voicemail, then to a disconnected number. Emails bounced back, undelivered. The next month's bank statements showed the accounts completely closed. Days blurred together as I waited for Jackson to return, to explain, to make things right. Each morning, I woke hoping today would be the day he would walk through the door with an explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. Each night, I fell asleep with that hope unfulfilled. Patricia and Walter watched me deteriorate with growing concern. I lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and withdrew from the few activities I had participated in. The physical therapist noted my regression, but I couldn't summon the energy to care. What was the point of getting stronger if I had nothing to return to? 3 weeks after Jackson's last visit, the nursing home administrator, Mr. Bradshaw, requested a meeting. His office was small but well appointed, with framed certificates and family photos displayed prominently. "Mr. Harrison, we have a situation regarding your account," he began, shuffling papers uncomfortably. "Your son set up automatic payments from his account when you were admitted, but the last 2 payments have been rejected due to insufficient funds. We've tried contacting him without success." "He's gone," I said flatly. "He took my money and disappeared." Bradshaw's expression shifted from administrative concern to personal sympathy. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, we still have a business to run. Without payment, we'll need to discuss alternative arrangements." The alternative arrangements involved applying for Medicaid, which would cover nursing home costs but required proving I had no financial resources. The process was humiliating, forcing me to document how completely I had been stripped of everything I had worked for. Patricia brought more devastating news the following week. "Nolan, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I think you should know. My cousin works at the realty office that listed your condo. It sold last month. The condo that was in Jackson's name. The condo filled with what remained of my possessions, my memories, my life. Gone without my knowledge or consent. There's more," she said gently. "My cousin," said the seller, "your son, has relocated out of state." She handled some of the paperwork and saw the new address. "He's in Arizona now." The full weight of abandonment crashed down on me. My son had not only stolen my money but had deliberately cut all ties, moving across the country without a word. He had calculated this betrayal, executed it step by step, and left me with nothing. That night was the darkest of my life. Walter was asleep, his soft snoring, usually an irritant, but now the only sound connecting me to another human being. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. Where had I gone wrong as a father? What character flaw in me had created a son capable of such cruelty? Or had Jackson always been this person, and I had been too blind to see it? Depression enveloped me like a heavy blanket, smothering hope and purpose. I began to question whether life was worth continuing. My health declined rapidly as I lost the will to fight. Food lost its taste, sleep brought no rest, and days held no meaning. Walter, usually gruff and sarcastic, showed unexpected compassion. He had noticed my spiral and refused to let it continue. One morning, he wheeled himself to my bedside and spoke with quiet intensity. "I watched a lot of good men give up in Vietnam," he said, "and some after they came home. Seen the same thing here. People who think they've lost everything, so they stop living before they stop breathing." I turned away, not wanting to hear whatever motivational speech he was preparing to deliver. "You think you're the only one who's been betrayed," he continued, undeterred. "My sister cleaned out my bank account while I was overseas. My wife left me for my best friend when the war screwed up my head. You don't corner the market on suffering, Nolan." His harsh words penetrated the fog surrounding me. I turned back to face him. "The way I see it, you've got two choices," Walter said. "Lie here feeling sorry for yourself until you die, which might take a pathetically long time, or get mad enough to do something about it." "What can I possibly do?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "He's gone. The money's gone." "So? You built a business from nothing once? You raised a kid alone? You think this is the one problem in your life you can't solve?" Walter shook his head in disgust. "I expected better from you." He wheeled himself away, leaving me with thoughts I couldn't escape. Was I really going to let Jackson destroy not just my finances but my spirit? Was I going to give him that final victory? That same day, Patricia introduced me to someone who would change the course of my remaining years. Terry Goldman was a semi-retired attorney who specialized in elder law and volunteered part-time with a legal aid organization. In her 60s, with steel gray hair and piercing eyes, she had seen hundreds of cases like mine. "Elder financial abuse is an epidemic," she told me in our first meeting, "and family members are the most common perpetrators. What your son did isn't just immoral, it's criminal." Terry explained my legal options with brutal clarity. I could file a police report for theft and fraud. I could pursue civil action to recover assets. I could contest the power of attorney and property transfers. None would be quick or easy, and success wasn't guaranteed. "But doing nothing guarantees you get nothing," she pointed out, "and lets him get away with it completely." As Terry investigated my case, the full picture of Jackson's betrayal emerged. He had been planning this for at least 2 years, gradually positioning himself to take control of my assets. The investment opportunities he claimed to have made with my money didn't exist. Instead, he had transferred funds to accounts in his name, used some to purchase a luxury home in Scottsdale, and appeared to be living extravagantly. Most painful was the discovery that I wasn't the first victim of his schemes. Terry uncovered complaints from former clients of Jackson's financial services job, alleging mismanagement of funds. He had been asked to resign from his position shortly before moving me to the nursing home, a fact he had concealed. This revelation forced me to confront the truth I had been avoiding. I had raised a son without moral compass or empathy. Somewhere along the line, Jackson had learned to see people as resources to be exploited rather than human beings, to be respected and loved. And I had been too blind, too desperate for his approval and affection, to see the warning signs. I had enabled his behavior through years of indulgence, excusing selfishness as ambition and entitlement as confidence. By giving in to his every demand without accountability, I had taught him that manipulation works. My generosity, intended as love, had fed something darker in his nature. This realization brought a night of soul-searching, so profound it felt like dying and being reborn. I grieved not just for my material losses but for the son I thought I had, the relationship I had believed in. That son, that relationship, had never really existed except in my desperate imagination. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The depression hadn't lifted entirely, but alongside it now burned a small, steady flame of resolve. Jackson had taken my money, my home, and my security. He would not take my dignity or my remaining years. The morning after my long night of soul-searching, I asked Patricia for help washing and shaving properly, something I had neglected for weeks. I put on the best clothes I had available, a pair of slacks and a button-down shirt Jackson hadn't deemed worth taking. I asked Walter to join me for breakfast in the dining room, rather than eating the tray in our room. Small steps, but they represented a monumental shift in mindset. I was choosing to live, to fight, to reclaim whatever I could of my life and dignity. Terry was surprised but pleased by my transformation when she arrived for our scheduled meeting. "You look like a different man," she observed. "I feel like one," I replied. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes to get justice." We started with the legal basics. I filed a police report detailing the theft, providing bank statements and documentation of the unauthorized withdrawals. I formally revoked the power of attorney, though the damage was already done. I initiated a civil lawsuit to recover assets, though Terry warned this would be a long process with no guaranteed outcome. Cases like this are complicated by the fact that he had legal authority through the power of attorney, she explained. "We'll need to prove he acted against your interests and abused that authority." The criminal charges were more straightforward. What Jackson had done constituted elder financial abuse, a crime taken increasingly seriously by authorities. However, his relocation to Arizona complicated jurisdiction issues. As we worked through the legal processes, Patricia introduced me to her brother Michael, a former IT specialist who now taught computer courses at the community college. Balding with thick glasses and a perpetual smile, he couldn't have been more different from his sister, but shared her compassionate nature. "Patricia says you need help tracking down your son," he said during our first meeting. "I'm not a private investigator, but I know my way around digital footprints." Michael taught me basic computer skills, showing remarkable patience as I struggled with concepts that seemed intuitive to him. Under his guidance, I created my first email account, learned to search effectively online, and began to understand social media platforms. "People reveal more than they realize online," Michael explained as he showed me how to search for Jackson. "They post vacation photos, check in at restaurants, share job updates. They create a digital trail without thinking about who might be following it." Sure enough, Jackson had made himself easy to find. His LinkedIn profile boasted of a new position as an independent financial consultant. His Instagram, left public out of vanity or carelessness, showcased his new lifestyle. The house in Scottsdale, vacations in Cabo San Lucas, a new BMW. In several photos, Allison appeared by his side, though she looked uncomfortable in most, her smile not reaching her eyes. Each image was a twist of the knife, visual proof that my son was enjoying the fruits of his theft. But they also provided valuable evidence for our case, and confirmed his location. As days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. I found purpose again, not just in pursuing Jackson, but in helping others. I noticed how many residents at Lakeside had stories similar to mine. Family members who had taken advantage, children who had abandoned them, savings that had mysteriously disappeared. Walter suggested we form a support group. "Misery loves company," he said with his characteristic bluntness. "Might as well make it useful company." With the reluctant blessing of the administration, we began meeting weekly in the small activities room. At first, just 5 residents attended, sharing stories of betrayal and abandonment. But word spread, and soon we had 15 regular participants, then 20. Some came just to listen, finding comfort in knowing they weren't alone. Others found their voices for the first time, anger and hurt pouring out in an environment where everyone understood. Terry began attending occasionally, offering legal advice and information about resources. Patricia and other staff members supported the group, recognizing its therapeutic value. Even Mr. Bradshaw acknowledged the positive impact it was having on residents' mental health. The group became a source of strength for all of us, a place where vulnerability was met with understanding rather than exploitation. For the first time since arriving at Lakeside, I felt I belonged somewhere, that I had value beyond the money I had lost. My physical health began to improve as well. I returned to physical therapy with new determination, pushing myself to regain strength and mobility. I started taking daily walks around the facility grounds, each day venturing a little farther than the day before. Mr. Bradshaw noticed these improvements and approached me with an unexpected offer. "We have a position opening for a part-time maintenance supervisor," he said. "Nothing too strenuous, just overseeing the regular maintenance staff and identifying issues that need addressing. Your construction background would be valuable. Would you be interested?" The offer stunned me. "Wouldn't my age be a concern? You've shown remarkable resilience, Mr. Harrison. And frankly, we need someone who understands buildings and can communicate effectively with contractors. The salary isn't much, but it would provide some income." It was a small opportunity, but it represented something I had thought lost forever. Independence, productivity, worth. I accepted immediately. The job gave me purpose and routine. Each morning, I made rounds of the facility, noting repairs needed, speaking with staff about concerns, and overseeing the maintenance team's work. I used my decades of construction knowledge to identify underlying issues others missed and saved the facility money by knowing exactly what needed professional attention and what could be handled in-house. As months passed, my team of allies grew. Walter remained my closest friend and fiercest advocate. Patricia and Michael continued providing support and expertise in their respective areas. Terry kept our legal case moving forward, despite numerous delays and complications. Mr. Bradshaw proved to be more compassionate than his initial businesslike demeanor suggested, finding ways to work with my financial situation while I awaited the outcome of legal proceedings. Small legal victories began accumulating. A judge froze what remained of assets we could prove were mine. The district attorney agreed to pursue criminal charges for elder financial abuse. The police in Arizona were cooperating with the investigation. None of these developments would immediately restore what I had lost, but they represented progress, acknowledgement that a wrong had been done to me. Through Michael's continued monitoring of social media, we observed changes in Jackson's situation. The extravagant posts became less frequent. References to his consulting business disappeared. Allison vanished from photos entirely. Something was happening in his life, possibly connected to our legal actions. 9 months after Jackson's disappearance, our efforts culminated in a crucial decision. I would travel to Arizona to confront him in person. The legal proceedings were important, but I needed this confrontation for my own closure, to look my son in the eye and demand accountability. Walter insisted on accompanying me. "You think I'm going to miss the final act of this drama?" "Not a chance." Patricia requested vacation time to join us, concerned about my health during such a stressful journey. Michael volunteered to drive, making it a road trip rather than dealing with the complications of air travel for a man in my condition. And so, our unlikely quartet prepared for a journey of justice and, I hoped, resolution. I had no illusions that I would recover all I had lost, or that Jackson would suddenly become the son I had thought he was. But I knew with absolute certainty that I needed to stand before him, not as a victim, but as a man reclaiming his dignity and demanding respect. The journey to Arizona took 3 days, with overnight stops to accommodate my limited stamina. We traveled in Michael's spacious SUV, Walter's wheelchair secured in the back, the trunk filled with evidence binders Terry had prepared and supplies for our uncertain mission. Those 3 days on the road formed a strange bubble of time outside normal life. As we left behind the familiar landscape of my home state for the increasingly arid terrain of the Southwest, I felt myself transforming. The nursing home resident, the betrayed father, the victim, all began to fade. In their place emerged a man with purpose, surrounded by people who believed in his cause. Our conversations during those long driving hours ranged from the deeply personal to the practical. Walter shared more about his experiences in Vietnam and his difficult return to civilian life. Patricia spoke of her own family struggles, including a brother who had succumbed to addiction. Michael, the quietest of our group, occasionally offered insights about technology's impact on human connection. We discussed strategies for the confrontation ahead, but also philosophy, politics, favorite books, and bad jokes. These people had no obligation to help me. They weren't family, weren't paid for their support beyond Terry's professional services. Yet here they were, giving time and energy to right a wrong done to someone who had been a stranger to them just a year earlier. Their commitment humbled me and reinforced my determination to see this through, not just for myself but for them. Scottsdale in early spring was pleasantly warm, a welcome change from the lingering winter we had left behind. Jackson's house was in a gated community of Spanish-style homes, with perfectly maintained landscaping and luxury cars in every driveway. Michael had booked us rooms at a modest hotel nearby, where we regrouped and finalized our plan. Terry had provided Jackson's exact address and confirmed through property records that he still owned the home. Our legal team in Arizona had obtained court orders allowing the serving of papers related to both the criminal charges and civil lawsuit. An officer would meet us at the property to ensure the confrontation remained peaceful and to officially serve the documents. The morning of the confrontation, I woke before dawn, my mind racing with all I wanted to say to my son. What words could possibly convey the magnitude of his betrayal or the depth of my disappointment? How could I make him understand what he had destroyed went far beyond money? Patricia found me sitting alone on the hotel patio, watching the sunrise paint the desert landscape in gold and crimson. She sat beside me in comfortable silence for several minutes before speaking. Whatever happens today, Nolan, remember that your worth isn't determined by how Jackson responds. You've already won by refusing to be broken by what he did. Her words steadied me, reminding me that this confrontation wasn't about changing Jackson or even recovering what was lost. It was about standing up for myself, about closing one chapter so another could begin. At precisely 10 o'clock, our small convoy pulled up outside Jackson's house. The officer, a serious young woman named Ramirez, met us as arranged. Walter insisted on joining me at the door despite the challenge of navigating his wheelchair up the curved driveway. Patricia and Michael waited in the car, ready to support if needed but giving me space for this most personal of moments. I pressed the doorbell and heard its chime echo inside the house. Long moments passed. I was about to ring again when the door swung open. Jackson stood before me, but not the polished, confident man who had abandoned me a year earlier. This Jackson looked tired, his designer clothes replaced by a rumpled t-shirt and jeans, his carefully styled hair grown out and unkempt. He had lost weight, and dark circles underlined his eyes. The shock on his face at seeing me standing on his doorstep was everything I had imagined in my preparations for this moment. His mouth opened and closed without producing words, his eyes darting from me to Walter to Officer Ramirez. "Hello, Jackson," I said, my voice steadier than I had expected. "May we come in?" "Dad?" he finally managed, sounding more like a confused boy than the calculated manipulator who had stripped me of everything. How are you here? Your father has some legal documents for you, Officer Ramirez stated formally, and I believe a conversation is overdue. Jackson stepped back automatically, allowing us to enter a living room furnished with expensive pieces that I recognized from designer showrooms I had visited when building homes for wealthy clients. My stolen money had funded this luxury, these symbols of success built on betrayal. What is this about? Jackson asked, attempting to regain composure. I'm very busy today. I have meetings. No, you don't, I replied calmly. You lost your job 3 months ago. Your consulting business never got off the ground. Allison left you when she realized what you'd done. You're selling possessions to maintain this facade. I know everything, Jackson. His face crumpled, the mask of confidence falling away completely. He sank onto a leather sofa, suddenly looking very young and very lost. I had imagined this moment differently, had expected to feel rage or vindication. Instead, I felt an odd, detached pity for this stranger who shared my blood but none of my values. Why? I asked simply. I gave you everything I could. Why wasn't it enough? Jackson stared at his hands. I was in trouble. Bad investments, debts. Then opportunities came up that could fix everything. But I needed capital. I told myself I was borrowing from you, that I'd pay it back double once these deals came through. He laughed bitterly. But they were scams, too. I lost it all, got in deeper trying to recover. So you abandoned me in a nursing home to die alone. I finished for him. Left me with nothing after a lifetime of giving to you. I couldn't face you, he whispered. Couldn't admit I'd failed. That I'd done what I did. Officer Ramirez stepped forward, holding out an envelope. Jackson Harrison, I'm serving you with papers regarding criminal charges of elder financial abuse, fraud, and theft in the first degree. You are also being served with civil lawsuit documents. You are required to appear in court on the dates specified. Jackson took the papers with trembling hands. Am I being arrested? Not today, Ramirez replied. But I strongly advise you to contact an attorney immediately and to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation. I had said less than I planned, but somehow it felt sufficient. This broken man before me wasn't worth the energy of rage. My life would never again revolve around seeking his approval or understanding his betrayal. As we prepared to leave, the door to an adjoining room opened, and Allison stepped out. She looked as surprised to see us as Jackson had been. Mr. Harrison, she said hesitantly. I thought you were in a nursing home back east. I was, I confirmed. Jackson told me you had left him. She glanced at Jackson, who wouldn't meet her eyes. We separated briefly. I've been staying with a friend, trying to figure things out. Jackson never told me the truth about your situation or the money. I only learned recently what he'd done. This explained her discomfort at our first meeting, and in those Instagram photos. She had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known the extent of it. I'm sorry, she said simply, if I had known. I nodded acknowledgement of her apology. The authorities will want to speak with you. You might have information relevant to the case. I'll tell them everything I know, she promised, shooting a look of disgust at Jackson. Outside, Patricia and Michael had been watching from the car and came to meet us as we exited. The confrontation had taken less than 20 minutes, but had changed everything. The mystery of Jackson's motivations was solved. Not calculated evil, but weakness, greed, and cowardice. The son I had raised had failed not just me, but himself. On the drive back to the hotel, Walter broke the contemplative silence. Well, that was anticlimactic. I was hoping for a dramatic confession and maybe some tears. Despite everything, I laughed. Real life rarely follows the script we write for it. Are you disappointed? Patricia asked gently. I considered the question carefully. I got what I needed. Not answers that make sense of his actions or make the pain go away. But I looked him in the eye as an equal, not a victim. I showed him and myself that he didn't destroy me. That's enough. The legal proceedings that followed were complex and protracted. Jackson attempted to flee to Mexico a week after our confrontation, but was apprehended at the border. This flight attempt strengthened the criminal case against him, removing any doubt about his consciousness of guilt. Facing overwhelming evidence and multiple charges, Jackson eventually accepted a plea deal. He would serve 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay restitution for the full amount stolen. The reality, as Terry had warned me from the beginning, was that most of the money was gone, spent on the lavish lifestyle documented on Instagram or lost in the failed investments Jackson had mentioned. The house in Scottsdale and remaining assets were seized and liquidated, ultimately returning approximately $200,000 to me, less than a quarter of what had been taken. It was something, but not enough to rebuild the retirement I had planned. The courtroom where Jackson was sentenced was nearly empty. No character witnesses spoke on his behalf. No family members sat on his side of the aisle. On mine sat Walter, Patricia, Michael, Terry, and surprisingly, Frank, my old friend who had warned me years earlier. He had followed the case from afar and came to offer support at this final chapter. When offered the chance to make a victim impact statement, I spoke briefly, but clearly. The money my son stole represented a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice, much of it made for his benefit. But what he took that caused the deepest wound was trust and family connection. Those cannot be restored by court orders or prison sentences. I do not speak today from hatred or a desire for revenge. I speak from a place of hard-won clarity. Jackson must face consequences for his actions, not just for my sake but for his own. Without accountability, there can be no growth or redemption. I forgive my son, not because he deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I release the burden of his betrayal while holding firm to the expectation of justice. And I move forward, diminished in resources, but strengthened in character, and surrounded by a new family of choice who have shown me the true meaning of loyalty and support. Jackson did not look at me as he was led away to begin his sentence. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a somber recognition that some broken things cannot be repaired, only acknowledged and left behind. 6 months after Jackson's sentencing, I stood in the small kitchen of my new apartment, making coffee for Walter, who sat at my second-hand dining table reviewing a draft of our latest grant proposal. The apartment was nothing like the home I had built with Sarah or even the condo Jackson had chosen for me. It was a modest one-bedroom in a senior living complex, walking distance from Lakeside Gardens, where I still worked part-time. The restitution money, combined with my small salary and Social Security benefits, allowed me to live independently again. It wasn't the comfortable retirement I had planned, but it was mine, free from deception or dependence. Walter had moved into the same complex 3 months earlier, our friendship continuing beyond the nursing home walls. We made an odd pair, the construction contractor and the history teacher, but our shared experience of betrayal and recovery had forged a bond stronger than many blood relationships. My work at Lakeside had expanded beyond maintenance supervision. The support group for victims of financial exploitation had grown into a formal organization with nonprofit status, offering resources, education, and advocacy. Walter and I co-founded it, naming it Second Foundations, both for the new beginnings it represented and as a nod to my construction background. The grant proposal on the table was our most ambitious yet, seeking funding to provide legal assistance to seniors who couldn't afford to fight the wrongs done to them. Terry had helped draft it, lending her expertise and professional credibility to our grassroots effort. "This looks good," Walter said, pushing the papers back across the table. "If we get this funding, we can help a lot of people." I nodded, taking a seat across from him. "Never thought I'd be running a nonprofit at 69. Never thought I'd be anything but bitter at 74, Walter countered with a wry smile. "Life's full of surprises, not all of them bad." This was the unexpected gift that had emerged from the wreckage of betrayal: purpose. In the years since confronting Jackson, I had spoken at senior centers, law enforcement trainings, and community organizations about elder financial abuse. My story, painful as it was to share, put a human face on a crime, often hidden in shame and silence. Patricia remained a dear friend, stopping by regularly with home-cooked meals and updates on lakeside residents. Her brother Michael had become our technical guru, building and maintaining the organization's website and teaching computer literacy classes for seniors to help them avoid online scams. Old friendships had been rekindled as well. Frank and I met weekly for lunch, making up for years of disconnection. Several former employees from my construction days had reached out after hearing about my situation, offering support and sometimes opportunities for small consulting jobs on their projects. Most surprisingly, I had reconnected with Sarah's sister, Eleanor, who had moved across the country shortly after Sarah's death. Our grief had separated us then, but now, with the perspective of years and shared concern over what had become of Jackson, we found comfort in reminiscing about Sarah and the values she had tried to instill in our son. The Elder Abuse Support Group at Lakeside continued, now led by a rotating committee of residents with me serving as advisor. From this group emerged the idea for a scholarship fund for nursing students specializing in geriatric care, inspired by Patricia's compassionate approach. The first 2 scholarships had been awarded the previous month, in a small ceremony that had filled me with more pride than any building I had ever constructed. My relationship with Patricia had gradually deepened beyond friendship. Nothing was official or labeled, but we enjoyed each other's company in a way that sometimes hinted at possibilities neither of us was quite ready to name. At our age, with our histories, we moved carefully, valuing what we had too much to risk it carelessly. The hardest part of rebuilding had been accepting that my relationship with Jackson might never be repaired. I had sent one letter to him in prison, not excusing his actions but offering a path to eventual reconciliation if he was willing to take genuine responsibility and make amends. Whether he would choose that path remained to be seen. I had made peace with the possibility that he wouldn't. Walter interrupted my thoughts. "You're getting philosophical again. I can tell by that look on your face." I smiled, grateful for his grounding presence. Just thinking about how losing everything somehow led to gaining what matters. "Don't get too sentimental," he warned. "We've got work to do. The Channel 6 reporter will be here in an hour for that interview about senior scams." That evening, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment. Walter was there, of course, along with Patricia, Michael, Terry, Frank, and Eleanor. The table was crowded in the small space. Mismatched dishes held simple food, and conversations overlapped in comfortable chaos. Looking around at these people who had entered my life during its darkest chapter, I felt a fullness that had nothing to do with material wealth. They had seen me at my lowest, broken and hopeless, yet had invested in my recovery and growth. They had become the family I chose, and who chose me in return. After dinner, as we sat with coffee and Eleanor's homemade apple pie, Frank raised his mug in an impromptu toast. "To Nolan, who taught us all that it's never too late to rebuild." Glasses and mugs clinked, and I felt a flush of embarrassment at being the center of attention. "I couldn't have done it without all of you," I said simply. "Sure you could have," Walter countered, "but it would have been a lot less entertaining for the rest of us." Laughter rippled around the table, warm and genuine. This, I realized, was the treasure Jackson could never steal: connection, purpose, resilience. In trying to take everything from me, he had inadvertently set me on a path to discovering what truly mattered. Later, after everyone had gone except Patricia, who stayed to help with dishes, I shared this thought with her. "That's the wisdom you've earned," she said, drying a plate with careful attention. "Not that suffering is good, but that it sometimes clears away what's superficial and leaves what's essential." "I wish I could have learned it an easier way," I admitted. She smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "Don't we all? But would it have sunk in as deeply?" As Patricia left with a gentle hug and promised to call tomorrow, I stood at my window looking out at the lights of the city. Somewhere out there, people were facing betrayals similar to mine, feeling alone in their pain as I once had. The thought strengthened my resolve to continue the work we had begun. I would never again have the financial security I had spent a lifetime building. The retirement I had envisioned was irretrievably lost. but in its place had grown something unexpected, a life with deeper meaning and connection than the one that had been taken from me. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone you loved and trusted, I hope my story offers some small comfort. The pain is real, and the losses may be permanent, but they don't define who you are or what your life can become. Have you ever had to rebuild after losing something important? Share your experience in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even our darkest chapters don't have to be the end of our story. Thank you for listening. And remember, what matters most can never truly be stolen.